Hey everybody, I just want to welcome you to this short video about performance reviews, specifically related to being a team leader. And really what we're going to spend time talking about today is what we want you to be thinking about as a team leader, how we want you to approach reviews, just some of the things that culturally are just part of our review process and how those things relate, just to help you kind of understand as a team leader, okay, what does this mean for me? How do I want to approach it? How do I make it work the best for me? And we're going to spend most of our time talking about that. We're not going to talk about the actual tool, the actual review tool, DevelopMe. That is relatively intuitive, and so we think that's going to be pretty easy for you to follow, and you can always ask questions from somebody in HR. I know Tabby is here today, and Ginger is here today also with me, and so we're going to collectively work through this. But if you have any questions about the actual tool, then you could send an inquiry to Tabby and somebody in the HR team, or you can ask another team leader, and I'm sure they'll be happy to help you with that. So that's just kind of our thought today. Jen and Tabby, anything else you want to add before we kind of dive in and get started on some of the stuff that we want to do? All right, so with that, let's just go ahead and move through. And the first thing is, okay, why performance management? Why is that an important thing? You can see the little diagram there has got a gap. And the truth of the matter is all of us have gaps. No matter how much we've learned, no matter how much our leadership has grown, no matter where we are, we may have been outstanding last year. Whatever the case is, wherever we are, we always know that there's always gaps. There's always things that we can get better at. There's new opportunities for us to press into. And really, performance management is just a way to help us make sure that the organization keeps moving forward, that everybody's thinking about growth, everybody's thinking about development, everybody's thinking about, okay, how can I grow? And the reason it's not so we can grow because it's about us, it's we can grow so that we can then take advantage of more opportunities that God would have for us. And that's what we really want to try to make sure that we understand with this whole concept of gaps. How do I recognize what I could be, what I should be, versus where I am now? Again, kind of self-awareness. And then, okay, how do I help close those gaps? Not just in me, but in my team members. And ultimately, if the whole organization is thinking that way, then the organization continues to take these big, huge steps forward every year, year after year after year. Ginger, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, related to gap, one thing that I think is so healthy about our particular annual review process is that it gives a wonderful opportunity as a team leader for you to recognize the difference in perception and belief of what your team member thinks of the gap and what you think of the gap. And that comes with really having a good, solid conversation on the front end before they even do their self-review, all the way through to the end, as we'll talk about. And one other thing that I love about this gap image related to what you just talked about is that sometimes when you're helping your team members through development, it's fuzzy time-wise, like, hey, just get better at public speaking. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, this is in a specified period of time. By the end of this year, specifically, what are some different behaviors, different mindsets, different things that you want to see? So it takes things that can be pretty fuzzy and can help them be really concrete between you and your team member.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good thought. All right, so now then what I want to talk about now, or what we want to talk about is, okay, the role of the team leader. What do I want you as a team leader, how do I want you to approach it? How do I want you to view this time, this opportunity that you're going to have? And so it's a great thing. You're driving future performance. You're not just rating past performance. The current leader, when you're going to complete your part of the team review, and we're going to go through the timing of it. But here's what I want you to know is that this is a tool for you as a leader to utilize to then say, okay, how can I help my team grow? How can I help my individual team grow? How can I help myself grow? But you want to use it that way. So the mindset that you have is, okay, how can I help take this team member from where they are to where they want to be, where they see themselves being, the goals that they may have, the goals that we organizationally have. And so that means that I probably won't treat every single one of the people I review the exact same way, because each one of them is unique. Each one of them has something unique that's going to drive them. Each one of them needs to be recognized in a little different way, appreciates to be recognized in a little different way. My conversations might look a little bit different. So I'm going to say, okay, how do I use this tool to best help that person grow? And really, that's an important thing for you to realize, because especially as a new team leader, you're yourself trying to fit into the culture, and you don't want to make a mistake, and you don't want to, And so just if you have that mindset, I think it will serve you really, really well. Ginger, any thoughts about that? Or Tabby, any thoughts about that additionally as something you've seen in the past?
Related to the current leader completing the team leader review, because I know that that's questions you all get because people shift around on teams here. And last year I had 2 team members that I picked up on January 1. So I had led them 0 days of the year before. And it was confusing to me at first as to why I was doing all their review process. But what your mindset makes total sense is that it would have not been helpful for the team member moving forward, the team members, if their old team leader had done that review. And I totally get it. So I like that philosophy that you all have, Tabby.
Yeah. Now with that though, it becomes really important, Ginger, and I know you did this, is that you have to really spend a lot of time connecting with their previous leader to make sure that you had the right information.
Yes.
All right, because so you're gonna connect those two things. You're the catalyst to connect the past and the future, but you've got to make sure that you're looking at the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very collaborative process. And even like Jerry said previously, if you have questions, definitely reach out to another leader. But having that conversation with the team leader that was leading that team member beforehand is going to definitely guide you through that part of the process. One good thing to always remember is that whomever the team leader is on the day that review's open is going to be the person who will actually be writing the review. So we do get questions about who is responsible for that. So if you are the leader the day that the review's open, you're responsible for writing that review. If you are newly leading that person, you'll definitely want to connect with the previous leader to make sure that you have all the information to get an accurate review completed for that team member.
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of big picture perspective, going back, just the big picture stuff is that you're rating goals over the entire 2016 calendar year, and you're going to be assessed where the team member is now, where they could be. We talked about that. So you're just going to want to try to say, okay, it's not just enough to talk about the past. You should always have a spot where, okay, a part of that you should be talking about, okay, now in the future, here's where maybe I see, or here's some things that you can talk about, at least get the conversation started. And then, because then after the review process, the last part of the review process, actually, and we get into the exact timeline towards the end, this will become more clear to you. But the last part of the review process is the team member taking the feedback that they've got for this year, and understanding what kind of lies ahead. Say, okay, how can I craft goals that are going to help me achieve what I need to accomplish? And so that's an important thing for us to recognize: is how do you help team members set goals for themselves at the end of this process? And so, Ginger, I know that that's something that's really, really important to you, and you've thought about an awful lot. So what would you say about this thing? Not every goal is created equal, and how do you help a team member create a goal?
Well, a lot of the goals that I see, and they're not bad goals. They are helpful and have good things that come from them, but they are based on an action step. Like, I am going to read a book. I'm going to go talk to 2 people about such and such subject. The goals are the action step that the team member wants to take. But I think a much better goal is what is the intended outcome that you are trying to attain? If you think back to that gap image, the person on the cliff on the left-hand side is where that person is now. It's the reality. It's their awareness of where they are now in whatever subject or whatever competency they're looking to develop in. The right-hand side of the cliff is where they need or want to be by the end of 2017 for this particular year. And the filling the gap is the action step. So write the goal based on the right-hand side of the cliff of where do they need or want to be. And they could put some action steps in there. That's A-okay and good. But if better action steps come up over the year, throughout the year, then that's okay that your team member, as long as they accomplished the goal, the end goal, even if they don't do the exact action steps they kind of thought were going to be their path. I think that's the best way to write a goal.
Sure. And then there's 2 different types of goals. One, it's just the simplest way to put it is there are goals that you just can't measure, having to do with relationships or having to do with more of the intangible stuff. And then there's goals that you can measure. Like, I want to increase, attendance, or I want to increase volunteer retention, or I want to improve customer service. That we have a survey that actually measures that. So just realize there's a couple different types of goals that we've got. And so it's important that you know the difference, and it's also important that recognize that, Ginger talked about if somebody has on their goals, I want to read a book. I want to read 2 books on leadership. So that's one of their goals, and they read 2 books on leadership coming to the end of the year. And let's say as a church we meet attendance and those kind of things, and that's their goal, is to read 2 books on leadership. Well, it would be kind of a mistake for me as a leader to look at that and say, oh, that means I'm an outstanding because I read 2 books on leadership. So it doesn't. So just realize that if you set goals that are truly outstanding goals, and you talk about that and have those conversations, and what does this mean for the organization? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for my expression into the organization? Just realize that not all goals are created equal, and so there's some real thought that should take place in setting goals to make sure that you're really striving to really and the goals reflect the organization. And we're going to talk about the organization in a minute, about why it's important that we should have some goals that should stretch us if we're going to expect to be truly outstanding or exceeding expectations as far as that goes.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing, Jerry, in objective goals, tell me if this is right, the way that I see objective goals is you certainly have your 2, 3, 4 goals that are on there.
Sure.
But you get to make a specific rating on that as the team leader, and that it's good to encompass all 3. It's not just the measurable things that are on the page,
that's exactly right.
but as a whole, looking at all the things that were accomplished by that team member, just performance in general. What are some objective things you can state, and how are you going to measure that? Because I think, like you said, if you're like, oh, they did everything that was on the objective goals, outstanding. Well, that misses a whole bigger picture of their past year.
Yeah, there's a whole lot. And that's why it's important for us as reviewers to actually take the totality of the year as much into effect as you can. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can go back through and read emails. Hopefully you've kept some notes along the way. You can think back to key initiatives and how they performed in those things and did things they weren't asked to do, and how did they. So there's a lot of different things, but you're right, it is broader than just those 5 or 6 things on the piece of paper.
One last thing I want to mention, a lot of times we get questions from leaders about goals that maybe aren't appropriate to put in Develop.me. If a team member has one of those goals, they can absolutely have those goals independently, and you guys can measure those outside of Develop.me. But as a leader, we have to determine what are those goals that we want to put in Develop.me, and what are the ones that may be something personal and we just manage outside of the review process.
So if I wanted to say, okay, I want to lose 10 pounds,
Right.
It's a great goal to have.
Yes, absolutely.
Not so sure how it impacts directly to my role.
Correct.
So that would be a great example. That'd be a great example. All right, so now dotted line leaders. All right, so some of you team leaders are going to be dotted line leaders, and it's important to know that not everyone has a dotted line leader, but certainly all of our ministry team people at the campuses all do. And so dotted line leader is really important because it's important for you to get your information in quickly. All right, your perspective is important. It's important input for the team leader, and it helps provide an accurate look at performance overall. And sometimes those perspectives are a little bit different. All right, let me give you a quick example. Let's say I've got somebody in ministry at a particular campus, right? Getting back to a little bit what Ginger talked about is the totality of the influence of that person. And so let's say the person on the campus they're killing it. They're the campus pastor's go-to person. They just do a lot of things outside of their role maybe to really help the campus work well. But from a central standpoint, I look at their ministry specifically, and I'm looking at it, it's not that great. I mean, it's doing okay. And so the campus pastor may view that person as outstanding, but the central team leader may view that person as not outstanding, not quite there or whatever. And it could be vice versa. It could be at the campus pastor doesn't view that person as outstanding, but relative to their specific ministry, from a central perspective, they're killing it. Right, so you can have some of those differences. It's important, though, that we recognize them. It's important that we reconcile the actual difference. Sometimes it's just 2 different people's perception of the same performance. So it's good that we get those out there. That's why it's important that if you have dotted line reviews to do those first. Because what that'll do is it'll allow the person who is their direct report to actually consider your input when writing their reviews. So that's really important thing. Send a consistent message as a dotted line leader, and just remember not everyone has one. Any other thoughts about a dotted line leader? If you're a dotted line leader, the bottom line is get them done soon, and your perspective matters. All right, so I talked a little bit about this at all staff, but if you weren't there and you're looking at this or listening to this, then I want to go ahead and explain it. What you're looking at on the slide is it's called a bell curve or a normal curve, and that's just a normal distribution of scores or numbers over. When you put them all together, it's called a normal distribution. That means you've got, typically what you've got is averages in the middle. Most people fall into, or the biggest piece is the average piece, and as you go to the right or to the left of average, then to the right you're getting higher and higher and higher levels of performance, but that kind of slopes down. If you go to the left, then that's kind of performance that's lagging the average, and then again that slopes down, and that's what's called a normal curve. And so we've just divided it up into 4 different quadrants. The best being on the right hand side, a little above average, kind of in the middle, a little below average, and then further below average, and that's called a normal curve. And that's all organizations, right? So if you looked at all the organizations in the world, they would form, and you stacked all the numbers and all the performance data up, then they would form a normal curve. Most would be average, some would be better than average, some would be worse than average. So that's all organizations. Now it's important for us to recognize, and we can look at the next slide, that Life.Church is kind of the same thing. Okay, but this is talking about the people in Life.Church, right? And so you see in the middle there, you've got people on the far right would be outstanding, or they're extending their influence beyond just their role. They're really separating themselves performance-wise from everybody else in the organization. They would be the kind of the superstars of the team. I don't know if that's maybe not a best word, but every team has outstanding players on it, and then there are people that are ahead of the curve, and they're mastering and they're growing and learning all the time, and they're getting better and better and better. And then you've got people that are still growing into their roles, and they're solid contributors. And then you've got people that are learning. They're new on the team. They're new to leadership or whatever it is. So they're just learning. And occasionally you have people that aren't keeping up because they're lagging the organization. The organization is moving, and if we don't move quickly enough with it, we can begin to lag behind the organization. We don't want to do that. So now then the next slide shows, okay, where does Life.Church stack up with all the other organizations? This is really important for us to understand. As you can see, that Life.Church is a high-performing organization. And so Life.Church is on the front side of that curve. And it's important that we all recognize that Life.Church is a professional, high-performing, results-oriented organization that is led by God, certainly. But if we don't understand that we are on the outstanding side of that, then we won't fully appreciate, one, what we're accomplishing. 2, we won't fully appreciate our own expectation of ourselves. Because if you're going to stay on a championship team, you have to be a championship caliber player, and that's the bottom line. And so we just want to make sure that we understand that, because then it'll help us understand our rating scale. It'll help us to understand, okay, how do we, when we're talking about rating our performance, if we don't have this, if we think, well, we're just an average organization, then okay, my performance might stand out. But if I say, no, I'm a key performer on a championship level team, I have to perform at that level, then that's a little bit different. And so it goes back into goal setting, it goes back into self-evaluating your own performance, and all those things are important. Any other thoughts about that, Ginger and Tabby? No. All right, so now then this gets us to what we've got at Life.Church. You've got that extending, you've got star players, you've got key players and veterans, developing stars and role players, and you've got younger or newer team members, younger to leadership, younger to the role, and you're just new. It's tough. If I'm a rookie in the NFL, I'm probably it's rare that I would be a starting player. That's absolutely rare. It's not unusual for a rookie player to make some mistakes along the way. It's all part of the learning process, and that's completely okay. We just have to recognize kind of where we all fit into the overall organization. And so now then the next thing to do would be actually look at the rating scale that we use. on that. So this is the rating scale that we have, and needs improvement is the far left, and it's just not meeting the basic requirements of work relationally, by accomplishment, or by leadership standards. And again, that could be because I'm just trying to figure it out and I'm new, or it could be that for whatever reason, that maybe I've been here a little while, but I'm not keeping up with the pace of the organization, because the organization is continuing to move. It's not static. We're always moving to the right. We're always getting better. We're always striving to do more. And then fully functioning. And so here's the thing that I want people to hear. Fully function, it means meeting all requirements of the role, performing at an expected high level. Very solid performer, doing well. Remember, you're on a championship level team. Man, fully functioning means that you're performing at that level. You're doing great work. So there should be nothing wrong with people. I want people to feel good about a fully functioning review score. I want people to understand that means I'm doing what I'm asked to do. It's doing what I'm supposed to do. And is there more? Sure, there probably is. But it could be that you're just not developmentally there yet. You're still learning. But you're a solid player. And then you have exceeds expectations, which is the meeting all requirements of the role and exceeding requirements by pushing themselves and their impact to a higher level. And then finally, outstanding is performing at a very high level within their role, impacting the entire organization, stands out when compared to others in the organization. Just to give you a sense of how these break down, typically a little bit less than 10% of our overall team will actually get an outstanding score. So not to say that they do happen. It's okay to view, if you believe that you're performing at an outstanding level, you should view yourself that way. But just make sure that you take the whole picture of the organization. Also, as I'm a team leader, one of the things that as a team leader I need to make sure that I do is that I view the whole organization when I rate my team. In other words, if I've got 5 team members on my team and I think they're all outstanding, that would be really unusual for that amount of outstandings to be on the same team. What I would look at there is, okay, maybe I'm not viewing performance from the same lens that the organization does. Similarly, if I've got a team and they're all meets expectations, are fully functioning, if they're all fully functioning, then that probably tells me, well, if everyone on my team is fully functioning, then okay, it could be that I've just got some team members I really need to help grow and take them to a new level, or maybe I'm being overly critical of my team relative to the whole organization. So it's just some breadth. HR will help, and we'll look at all those review scores and help normalize them, but that's just an important thing to remember as I'm coming through and actually trying to figure out ratings for my team. Ginger and Tabby, any thoughts?
The only thing I want to add is that to remind everyone that the team leader review is the one that's going to drive this rating. And so definitely, like we talked about before, you want to take that dotted line leader perspective into your overall review. However, where you land as a leader for your team member is where their rating will come from.
Yeah. The rating of record is the team leader's rating. That's exactly right.
So I have a couple of questions for you. And this first one I ask you every year, but let me just be
Sure.
a consistent person, Chair. I ask you and Terry every year, and that is, when I am rating my team members, do I rate them based on their abilities and competency and their capacity, or based on what I see in the organization? Because that chart makes me think I should base them on what the abilities I see in the whole organization, not just what I see their capacity.
That's correct. It's the whole organization.
Okay.
I mean, because we all, that's just the reality of it, is they have to be, for us to do reviews at an organization level, that needs to be the litmus test. And so when you just think of the amazing players, and that also gives you something to strive for. It also gives me something to look forward to and say, man, and again, with our rating scale, remember, there's nothing, fully functioning is, you should be proud. Because you should be proud of the team you're on and the job you're doing. And then you just will begin to identify, okay, where can I grow from here? And you don't have to be sick to get better. That's the whole thing, is we can always get better. So you had another question, Judge.
And this is related to the learning and lagging, young and new. Just to clarify, is that for lagging, it doesn't just mean, sometimes I've seen, they're like, well, they're lagging because they're not getting a piece of software that they should be getting or whatever, which that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But it can be, a variety of it. It could be like their attitude, a variety of things that are really, as you even said, lagging the team behind because
Sure.
of that person.
And that gets back to what you said about you really have to you just can't look at those 4 or 5 goals that are on the piece of paper. You have to take the whole big picture and say, man, there is something about it. And it could be attitude. It could be work. It could be any number of different things that might cause somebody to lag.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal then there is to just help them try to connect with, okay, how do we get back on track?
Yeah.
And make up some lost ground. And I think that could be, and there's a lot of different reasons why that could happen, honestly.
That's good. Okay.
All right, so then let's just talk about 3 phases of the review process, and we'll have the timeline coming up. The first thing is team member self-review, and this is really important. Everybody does one. As a leader, you're going to do a team leader self-review on yourself, and what I'm looking for here is self-awareness. I'm looking for an accurate self-critique of what we did well, what we could do better, where I want to go, how I'm tracking on that, taking into account my whole sense of work performance, my whole sense of what my contribution is to the team that I'm on. And so I don't want it to be overly fluffy. I don't want it to be overly critical. I don't need to play a game and say, okay, I'm going to set it really high so it'll make my team member feel bad about if they rate me lower, or I don't want to set it really low because I hate to be disappointed, and if I'm lower than my team leader, then I won't be disappointed. And just try not to let any of that seep into your mind. Just look at it, look at your performance, and say, hey, based on that, this is what I really think is true. And so as a team leader, you're looking for that from your team members in the pre-review. The team member is going to write their self-review, and they're going to set up a time and talk with you. And there should be a good, meaningful conversation there. As a team leader, I'm not trying to correct. I'm not trying to bring the review at this point. As a team leader in a self-review, I'm listening to the team member's perspective. It's informing me on things, on their view of their perspective. It's helping me see things that maybe I didn't consider, both good and bad. But I'm not trying to correct. I'm not trying to, you said this, well, you've got to be kidding yourself. I'm not trying to do any of that. I'm just asking questions. I'm letting it be their time to tell me the things that they're proud of from the year before and where they think they can grow. Very informative as a team leader and a really good time. If you do that right, it can be a good quality time for both the team member and very informative for me as I go to write the review, which is what's next. All right, so we have the team leader pre-review, or the team member pre-review, or self-review is what we call it. And then phase 2 is where the leaders start writing reviews, and they're going to start January 24th, and we'll look at the timeline. That'll be the last thing we leave you with so that you can have a real clear expectation of the timeline for it. Starting the 24th, it will end the 12th, and during that time, you're going to want to make sure that you get all your leader reviews written during that time. Remember, if you have dotted line reviews, you're going to want to do them on the front side of that. Only people that are hired prior to 10/1 of 16 will actually participate in the review process. The reason that we do that is because they would have been here less than 90 days, and so there's a whole different 90-day review process that all of those team members will work through, and then they'll fold into this process in 2017. And then LXP interns will not participate in the annual review process because they have a different timeline and they have their own evaluation system set up for LXP interns. So that's just a brief overview of what to expect. And then we'll talk about the next thing that we'll talk about is just another thing is how taking pay and tying it to performance. And that's something that Life.Church does is we look at performance, and oftentimes this is the time that we do pay increases and all those things. And then so we pay is prorated based on the number of months in the review. So and the reason that we do that is because we review everybody at exactly the same time. So we have to go ahead and adjust those things as we go through to make sure everybody's on the same review cycle. So if let's just say Ginger was hired in July, and then her review would only have 7 months of that year. And so we would prorate whatever increase that worked out to based on her review score, then she would be prorated 7/12. So she would get an increase before she'd been here a year. It just would be a little bit less. But if you do all of the math, then it actually works out slightly better in the team member's favor to actually process the things that we do this way. And that's important so we have everybody reviewed at the same time. If an LXP intern went to a staff role, we use the date of hire to the team, the staff role, for review purposes, and that's just some good clarification. And then when you actually receive those things, The increases will take place on the March check, 9th check for hourly, and the March 15th paycheck for salary, which is important because when we look at the timeline here, which is I think one of the in just a couple slides, you'll see that it's important that we actually cover our reviews with our team members prior to they actually seeing the increase on their next paycheck. So that's just an important part of the overall thing. All right, let's just go ahead and move on. And this is the review timeline that we've talked about. So you see that the self-review phase is January 16th to the 23rd. Then you go into the team leader review phase is the 24th to the 12th. That's when all of those reviews must be written and finalized. Again, if you're a dotted line leader, you need to get your dotted line reviews done first so that people writing the reviews, the team leaders will have your input to go and consider when they're writing reviews. February 13th to March 2nd, what we do there is the HR and administration, we just review all of the reviews. We just make sure that scores are following that. Remember we talked about that normal curve and that we've got some consistency in reviewing across the different areas, across campuses, across Central. So we make sure that there's consistent because getting back to Ginger's point, I'm not reviewing based on, as a team leader, maybe my experience or where I believe the person themselves is at. I'm reviewing them based on the totality of the organization. And then March 3rd and 14th is a response phase, and that's where those reviews are actually covered. And remember, if you have hourly people that you're reviewing, their first check will be March 9th when any increase will be reflected, so you'll need to have those done by then. And certainly all of the other team members will need to be completed. You'll have to actually sit down and have that meeting with them before the 14th. So that's just an important thing for you as a leader to make sure you schedule all those and make sure you get all those things done by the 14th. And then what happens then is it falls back on us as team members then to go ahead and begin to build those goals. Okay, what kind of goals am I going to do? I've got my review. I understand what I'm trying to accomplish in 2017. So here's the specific goals that I have that's going to help me accomplish that. And then those are due on March 31st.
Yeah, so all these phases, I can see the importance, self-review before my team members even start writing it, for me to really give some good expectations of what you talked about at all staff, what the ratings even mean, what I write in my team leader review, really important. But that response and sit down with the team member, gosh, that's a big moment. Sure. for you and that team member. What are some things that you say are the good versions of that? And the bad, because some of us, even just by preference, a personality, whether we can just be more of an unclear person sometimes, and we like to leave things more broad. Well, this is a time to try to make some things more concrete. If we don't like to step into conversations and we're kind of nervous about it, we want to tiptoe into things. Well, I think our team members really like you to just be kind of more straightforward, respectfully, right? So what are some good things that you all see in that response phase?
A couple of different things. One thing, getting back, is I want to make sure that if there is something that came up in the pre-review, in the self-review, where the person's kind of talking about their performance, and let's say they had an idea that their performance was really, they're really excited about it, and I was probably less excited about it, then that would clue me in that, okay, I've probably got a little bit of a gap I have to help that team member reconcile. And so just being thoughtful at how to reconcile that gap would be one of those things. And then too, the other thing is, man, I really would never want to surprise a team member. In other words, if they've gone through the whole year and I've never expressed this, but now all of a sudden it shows up in their review, I would want to make sure that I would at least have a reasonable explanation as to why that happened. And if it did, and so let's say there's something that I've noticed, but I just, for whatever reason, didn't talk to you about it, even though I know I should have, then I probably need to own that part in the review process, right? In other words, so I just want that to be a real conversation. I want to have the mindset of, how can I help this team member grow the best? And what does that interaction look like? As I write the review, it's always helpful to actually, as I write it, to think about what's it going to be like when I sit across the team member and talk about this. And because that just helps me then make sure that I'm writing what I really want to say, how I really want to say it, because sometimes it can be kind of awkward. I've written something and not put some thought into it, but now I'm sitting there across from the team member and they're looking at me like, what the heck? And that can be awkward. So it just doesn't mean that I don't give the message. It just means that I really think about how I'm gonna say it, what it's gonna feel like in that moment, and to just be real thoughtful about that time, because I want the team member to walk away with what I want them to walk away with. And sometimes I do better at that than other times, but it should always be something that we really think about.
Now, I know if a team member receives a needs improvement rating, that response with their leader is going to look a little different than with the other ratings. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that?
And that gets to the point, yeah, because if somebody gets an overall needs improvement score, with that becomes a kind of a warning that says, okay, we need some specific behaviors that's going to reconcile this. So it's rare. It is rare that we have team members that get needs improvements, and that's again one of those things. One of the first conversations I have, if somebody says I have a team member that is a needs improvement, I'm going to say, okay, is this grading going to be a surprise to that team member? And if the answer is yes, then really I'm looking at a leader challenge as much as I'm looking at right. And that's the conversation: is how can that be? And so that's the first conversation. But if the answer is yeah, this is not going to come as a surprise. We've had a lot of conversations. Then it becomes a written warning will actually accompany the review, because at that point we identified, man, this needs to improve. So let's come up with a really distinct plan, very focused on getting that performance back to where it needs to be, which is always good. All right. Okay, so I hope this is beneficial. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to people that have done it before, other leaders in the organization. You can reach out to HR, Tabby and Terry, reach out to myself, and we can, and our Ginger, especially with goals. If you're lucky, how can I help team members come up with great goals? We'd love to help you with those things. We spend a lot of time on that every year. We spend a lot of time on this review process because it's such an important part of the culture of Life.Church. And so hope this has been beneficial. Again, if you have any questions, let us know. Go out and have a great review process, and really, we know that you're going to do a fantastic job. So thank you very much.